Good evening. Has everyone got water and chocolates? Good. My name is Connie Brekken. I'm president of the Friends of the Edina Library. And the Edina Community Foundation and the Friends want to welcome you to this very special evening. We also want to thank for their support the Edina Senior Center, Edina High School, Edina Community Education and Edina Resource Center, the Edina League of Women Voters, and the Friends of Hennepin County Library. Now, as the president of the Friends, it's in my DNA, I have to ask, how many of you here are member of the Friends of the Edina Library? Show of hands. Great, thank you so much. Now, for all of those of you who didn't raise your hands, this is a great opportunity to join a great organization that helps support this jewel of a library. And we hope that you will consider joining, and if you want to join tonight, we will take care of that. Dan Rivkin, Dan, can you stand up? Dan has some forms we will give you, and he can answer any questions you have about our organization. One of the benefits of being a friend is helping out with our semi-annual book sale, and every year we raise thousands of dollars that go to help fund children's programs, author talks, the purchase of periodicals, supplies, furniture, and every year for many years, we have been able to make a substantial donation to the collections fund of the Hennepin County Library. In fact, our next sale is less than 2 weeks away. It's Saturday and Sunday, October 25th and 26th. Saturday is the regular sale where most books sell for $1, and Sunday you can come and all the books that fit into a grocery bag are $5, so that is a real deal. So please come, and if you want to help, see me after the program. We will talk. And in case you're wondering if printed books are still popular in this digital age, we have calculated at the end of the sale on Sunday, 10,000 books will have been carried out of this building. Thank you. Now, while you came to hear what the panelists have to say and what they're reading, we also want to hear from you. So on each table, you will see slips of paper. We want you to put down a favorite book that you would recommend, fiction or nonfiction, put the title and the author, if you remember it. I hope not like me, I never remember authors. And if you don't remember the author, maybe put something down like this took place in Vietnam or something so we can research it and find it. And we are going to be calling on some of you throughout the evening, and you can get up and talk about your book too. If you don't want to be called upon, that's fine, but please fill out one of the forms, because in the end, we're going to compile all of the recommendations into a list that is going to be printed up and made available here at the library for anyone that comes in. And if you want to take notes, on the table in front of you are book journals that you are free to take home. That is our gift to you tonight as a thank you for coming. Now, I would like to introduce one of the staff librarians, a longtime employee of the Edina Library, and as everyone who knows her knows, a tireless worker at the library for the programs and the patrons, and an author herself. Please welcome Maureen Malia Smith.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you, everyone. And if your chair is facing that way, feel free to just turn it around and face this way. You can turn your chair in whatever comfortable way is good for you. I always have the PBS parts of it. Just a few things. If there was an emergency in this room, we could go immediately out that door and be safe and let the fire department or whoever needs to be here. We do have restrooms right over here if you need them. We have them down the hallway as well. I also want to thank my supervisor, Ann Melrose, who is here tonight, and Tony Miller, my former supervisor, both senior librarians at the library. You can let that person in if you want to. I make up my rules as I go along. And I want to thank Lois Linger-Thompson, who is the director of our library, and the friends who keep us going, the Friends of the Edina Library. And we have a few upcoming events. One is a program funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. It will be in the room next door. It's called Opera Viva. It's Wednesday, October 22nd. It's the Minnesota Opera resident artists will be singing, and there will be 2 or 3 more of these programs. And right now it seems to be full, so you may have to barter for free tickets. You can talk to me about that. There is also going to be Dazzling Dave, the Yo-Yo Master, is coming November 17th. So it will be at 6:30, and it will be fun. There's registration. My colleague, Tracy Viezda-Letola, the Youth Services Librarian, has set up a college prep at the library. It will begin again on Mondays, November 3rd through December 15th. It is free college coaching. And we do have a Great Decisions program coming up, Israel and the United States, Monday, October 27th. Again, we are full. There may have to be bartering, but not with me. We do have 2 other programs coming up in November. One is a landscape gardening program, which I can tell you more about, and then an e-book publishing program done by the Loft downtown. So people that are interested in electronic publishing and e-book publishing and the self-publishing world altogether, please see me. We have the Loft will be teaching that program as well here in November, and I can tell you more about it. I'm turning this podium over to Dick Crockett. Dick is the head of the Edina Community Foundation and has worked with the Edina Reads program for 10 years now. He's on the Edina Reads committee and is one of the first chair people of it. Thank you.
Well, welcome. When Maureen and I started the program,
I forgot to mention that it was Linda's idea for this night, Linda Brandt's.
okay,
I'm sorry.
she's capable of making the rules up as she goes, and I hope I'm capable of responding to the changes as they happen. Well, we had a great idea 10 years ago, which is to start in Edina a program that had been experimented with in other communities, most closely St. Paul, by starting a 1-book-a-year community read. And the book was Khalid Hosseini's The Kite Runner. And I see some nods here. I'm just curious how many of you were at that first meeting. Isn't that great? A few here. And since then, we've had 34 more. So I'm happy to welcome you to the 35th Edina Reads program in our 10-year history. What that reflects is that about 4 years into the program, we decided to expand it to a multi-event per year program, not just 1 a year, but 4 to 6 a year. And Maureen gets the credit for pretty much organizing all those programs under the, with the inspiration of a committee that she works with. Tonight, for example, Linda Brandt on the committee, right over there, is responsible for suggesting this great idea. Our last Edina Reads program was just this summer when Ann Ursu, a delightful children's author, had a program for families and kids. Very popular young author in this community. And our next one is William Kent Kruger, a very highly regarded and popular Minnesota mystery writer, who I think is going to speak more about his literary novel, Ordinary Grace, than he is about his mysteries. But that's one you don't want to miss. Maureen, when is it? Do we have a date? February?
It's in February.
Yeah, I think mid-February. You'll hear about it. Mm-hmm. So the theme for my short sermon tonight is the judicial maxim, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We have hosted all these 35 Edina Reads programs, 34 I guess, 34, on the basis of an assumed truth, which is that all these authors are really very interesting people, and that we would benefit by coming together to hear these interesting people talk. That in large part, if not almost universally, has been the truth. But there's a whole truth that we don't talk about, which is that many times, if not all the time, there are very interesting other people in the room as well, the readers and the audience. And so what we're doing tonight is honoring the rest of the people who make this program work so well because they are so interesting. Now, we've stacked the deck a little bit for that by picking 9 readers who represent very diverse backgrounds: education, journalism, law, medicine, philanthropy, public service. We've balanced it gender-wise, 4 women, 5 men. We have speakers ranging from under 15, I think I see them right back there, to north of 80. And you're going to get a nice perspective there. And I should have mentioned we also have business ranging from somebody with a local eatery to people with national advertising clients. So prepare to hear some very interesting people. Now the last part of that maxim, nothing but the truth, is not going to apply tonight. We're not interested in the truth. We're interested in opinions. And that's what you're going to hear. So these people aren't accountable for the truth of what they say. We're just asking them to tell us what they think about these books and why they might recommend them to us. The format is going to be a little different. I have roughly 3 20-minute blocks to work with here in running this meeting. So we're going to deal with 3 authors at a time. The format will be that I'll introduce them. We hope, since I don't have a hook with me, that they'll remember they're only supposed to speak for 3 to 4 minutes each to give us the general gist of their book. And then that should leave us 5 to 10 minutes for questions from the audience for any one of the 3 or for additional submissions at that time. And Connie will help us collect those, I believe. So I'll introduce 3 at a time. We'll have that part of the program, and hopefully about 20 minutes later I'll introduce another 3, and about 20 minutes after that another 3. Any questions so far? Okay. I can't resist a couple ads for the Edina Community Foundation since we got in some for the Friends of the Library. First, our next program is an Edina Dialogue program, very interesting. Next Wednesday noon, co-sponsored with the Chamber of Commerce, a CEO roundtable. Richard Davis from U.S. Bank is our keynote speaker. We have several prominent CEOs from the Edina community talking about economic development in Edina, why it's happening so hugely, what we can do to sustain it, what kind we might not want. And secondly, a week from Saturday, you came in the dark probably so you can't see it, but there's a sign out on the table for our Edina Day of Service. This is an opportunity for all kinds of community organizations and individuals, kids and adults, to come together, usually cleaning up some part of the community, Highway 100 in the case of my Rotary Club, senior citizens' yards in the case of the Edina wrestling team, and a whole host in between. Chris Marshall works for the foundation and is our Connecting with Kids director, leads that, and if you have any questions, get a hold of me and I'll connect you with Chris. So our first speaker tonight grew up with grandparents from Edina. Margo Bredeson is the owner and operator of Patisserie Margo, a delightful coffee and pastry shop right over here on Gus Young Avenue. She's been there for 16 years as the owner and operator, helped by her husband who keeps the book, and 4 children, each of whom help out in their own way. She's been a pastry chef for 38 years. She went to high school in Edina, so she knows this community pretty well, and she knows a lot of people. I know she knows the mayor because that's one of his favorite places for coffee. If I have this right, she's going to speak about several memoirs by an author named Ruth Reichel, and also a couple of cookbooks by Susan Loomis, the Farmhouse Cookbook and the French Farmhouse Cookbook. Sarah Haberman is switching to a completely different area of business, is the co-founder of Haberman, a full-service marketing agency with a clearly defined mission. Very different for a business, to tell the stories of pioneers who are making a difference in the world. You notice I didn't say that the mission was to make money. I think they do that, but they do it by concentrating on this almost nonprofit type mission. The empowerment of women, growing sustainable food, and supporting socially conscious organizations have been consistent themes in her work. This includes working with female influencers such as the futurist Barbara Marx Hubbard, author of Conscious Evolution, and polar explorer Anne Bancroft, fairly highly respected author in her own right. She's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a bachelor's degree in human ecology. She's going to discuss a Susan Power book, Sacred Wilderness. That sounds like fun. And then our third speaker is Jim Hovland. He's a lawyer in the group. Recently relocated his law firm, now Hovland and Rasmus, to Edina. So for the first time in a long career, he doesn't have to drive a long ways to go to work. He's played a major leadership role in developing the Edina Community Foundation, where he has been on the board for 20 years. It's just amazing. He's our institutional memory, He's responsible for some of the early dramatic changes in the foundation. And he was chair of the board for 10 of those years, starting in 2001. He also belongs to the Edina Morningside Rotary Club and was recognized by the Edina Chamber of Commerce as its Business Person of the Year in 2004. Most of course, know him as the mayor of Edina. And he's been in that position for 10 years, and I think on the city council before that for another 6 or 8 years, Jim. 6, I think. 6. It's going to be a long time to remember. He's a member of the I-494 Corridor Commission and the Regional Council Mayors. And I suppose it's only appropriate that the public servant in the group would have picked Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, is his book tonight. We hope our public servants look for meaning. We're looking forward to that. So, in short order, it'll be Margo, Sarah, and Jim. Margo?
Hi. I thought maybe I might have to bribe you all to listen to me by bringing cookies. I didn't know how many were going to be here, though. So, but when they asked me to do this a little while ago, I said, yeah. Somebody who was in the shop had asked me, do you read? I said, yeah, I love reading. I read all the time. In fact, I really attribute what I do to my love of reading. I do not have a background in, I don't have a schooling. I went to UW-Madison too, wherever you are, the other. Go Badgers, yeah. Careful. But I spent most of my time learning how to do things by doing an extensive amount of reading and then researching and doing it myself. So I don't have a culinary school background, so thank goodness for cookbooks and good authors. But Ruth Reichel, who wrote a trio of books, and I do love books in series or in multiples. She wrote 3 books. They start out and kind of span her life time from when she was a small girl to when she was actually retiring from doing her work as the New York Times food critic. Was the final book, but the first book is called Tender at the Bone. Talks about her young years with her inner family, with her mom. Who there's a chapter in the book called The Queen of Mold, and it's a book that's so it's poignant. It deals with all kinds of family issues and the place that food has in Ruth's life, and how it sort of helps her make her way through her life. It's that thread that ties everything together, and but it's laugh out loud funny while you're reading it by yourself, and but it's really delightful. Just tender about her relationship with her dad and things that went on in her family. The second book is called Comfort Me with Apples. Takes her into her kind of radical years spending in the counterculture of Berkeley, and actually getting to work with some of the people who I've read their stuff and pored over their recipes and pored over their writings about food and just the importance of our food sources and the whole eating locally and kind of thing. Just really exciting to me to see that. A lot of times people think they think about California and Alice Waters and things like that, but there was some people in Wisconsin, Odessa for one, who was really major influence here, and she's done some writing. So it's an interesting area of study. And then her final book was called Garlic and Sapphires, and that's when she was the New York Times food critic, and some of the funny things that stories that she relays about when she was dressing up in disguise so that people wouldn't know who she was when she went into the restaurants to review them and stuff. And now she's the editor-in-chief of Gourmet Magazine. But she's a delightful author, and I really appreciate her books and have thoroughly enjoyed them. And the other thing I brought, because those books, I was given those books originally by an employee of mine and thoroughly love them, and now I give them to all my pastry chefs who work for me. at some point in time they get those as Christmas gifts. But she also, that former employee, turned me on to Susan Loomis books. I had someone come in last week, and say, I'm headed off to Provence. Can you tell me where I should go? Well, I've never been to France. I haven't had a lot of opportunity to do much traveling. I'd love to, but I do my traveling through books. And these are some, I would highly recommend Susan Loomis's books to have a sense of what those areas are like. So I recommended the book to her, and I said, if you want to know about Provence, read what she has to say about visiting farms and talking to people there, and what they're making, and the ingredients that they're using, and how passionately they feel about where they get their fish, and the salt that they have there, and things like that. And she's just a delightful author and has so much to say about food, and is really inspiring. And she's one of the authors that really inspires me when I read her to create new things. So, thanks.
So, thank you. I'm Sarah Haberman, and it's great to be here. And thank you, Leslie J. Krause. He was one to invite me, so it's a pleasure to be here. I read Sacred Wilderness. I'm wondering if anyone has read this book in here. No, well, okay. And I'm one of those who likes to hold a book and feel a book. I don't want to read it on a nook, so I like to hold it. And someone recommended this to me, and I ate this book up. So I have a lot of heart for this. And after I read it, I was really interested in Susan Power, and discovered that not only is she an award-winning author, but she's also a member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. She teaches Intro to Native American Literature at the University of Minnesota. She lives in St. Paul. And I just want to find her and talk to her. So I'm hoping I can do that. I'm going to track her down. And what I learned when looking into Susan is it took her 7 years to write this book. This was an incredible spiritual journey for her. And I think if you choose to read it, you'll see why. So this is a book of a story about 4 clan mothers, 4 very wise women. It's fictional, by the way. And these women come from different cultures and centuries that are magically woven together to take you on a journey of hope and healing. So this book begins with a modern-day clan mother story of Gladys Swan. And she's an Ojibwe elder who becomes a housekeeper for a woman who lives in a mansion on Summit Avenue. And the woman that lives in the mansion, she's about a 45-year-old woman. Her name is Candace, and she's married to her husband. They're empty nesters, and she's not very fulfilled. She's kind of lost in her life, very disconnected from her husband, and spends her time on serving on boards and working out and doing her nails, things like that. But it's clear she's not very happy. So Gladys Swan, who's the housekeeper, who becomes a housekeeper for Candace, decides to make it her mission to help heal Candace. Candace is part Mohawk, and she's never been in touch with her roots. So Gladys decides this is her mission to put her in touch with her ancestors. So that's what this story is about. And the other clan mothers in this story include Mariam, who Christians know as the Virgin Mary. So you get to go back into biblical times, which is interesting. And another mother is Jigonasea, and she's a 17th century Mohawk woman. And she takes us back to when the Native Americans first encountered Christian missionaries. So you're traveling in these different time periods with these very wise women. And the 4th clan mother is Ruby Two-Axe. And she's Candace's great-grandmother and an older Mohawk. And she tells us of losing and finding her culture back in the early 1900s. So you travel this incredible thread of ancestral wisdom, which eventually brings back life, hope, and wholeness to Candace, the main character. So why I love this book, and I'm almost through here, is one, I enjoy reading books that raise our consciousness, and this is definitely one of them for me. There's a profound message of forgiveness and acceptance of other people and their cultures and traditions. And coming from a Unitarian background, I really appreciate that. That's important to me. And so I really, really resonated with that message. I also appreciate learning from indigenous cultures and love the spirituality of Native American traditions. So the whole reverence for life and the interconnectedness of all things resonates deeply with me, and that's a big part of this book. And finally, it's really fun to read a book that takes place in Minneapolis and St. Paul. You get to travel to Summit Avenue, you get to go to Birch Bark Books in here, and the University of Minnesota's Bell Auditorium. So it's fun to take on a journey that you're familiar with as well. So I hope you decide to read it. It's a fabulous book. Thanks for your time.
Well, good evening, everybody. How are y'all? Great. This notion of man's search for meaning, the Viktor Frankl book, was something that I picked up as a result of a project we've been working on in the city. And I'll, if you want me to get behind the microphone, I will. Is that better for people if I stand back here? We are a pilot city. Some of the folks in the room know this, some don't. We are a pilot city with AARP on a project called Life Reimagined. And we're calling it Life Reimagined Edina. And we had a kickoff about 2 weeks ago. And this is the notion of, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? At a flexion point in my life, when I can go a lot of different directions, how do I decide what direction I want to go? How do I find this meaning that Candace was searching for? And we could give her this book, Man's Search for Meaning, and also get her in touch with AARP or us on Life Reimagined. So AARP is making a big statement on this whole Life Reimagined project for their individual members. They're looking for a pilot community to see if some of these principles work in a city. We're fortunate that we got picked because Richard Leiter, who wrote Life Reimagined and Pack Your Bags, has his office in Edina, and he was instrumental in convincing AARP that we should be part of this project. So, as I said, about 3 weeks ago, we kicked this off over at the Westin. We had 200 people show up. And during the course of that conversation about life, the meaning of life, how do you find the meaning that you search for? Leiter touched on 4 topical areas. You need to live in a place that you love, Edina. You need to live with people that you love, your tribe, people that live in Edina and around, in your family. You need to have a job that you care about, and you need to feel like you have a purpose for living. And so Leiter happened to mention Man's Search for Meaning, the Viktor Frankl book that he wrote in 1945 after spending several years in Auschwitz. Getting out, he was an Austrian psychiatrist, wrote this book in 9 days. And a lot of observations about what he experienced in the concentration camp. And if I could boil it down to a simple phrase, it would be that you can find meaning in life even under the most dire of circumstances. And that is his message to all of us. I think that should resonate with everybody. Man's search for meaning is a primary objective, not a secondary rationalization for some of the things that we're doing. So keep that in mind. Some of the stories that he told in the book I thought were fascinating. It goes into this notion of how things can happen to you at the time you don't know if they're good or bad. Towards the end of the war, he was thinking about escaping with another prisoner. They made a couple of trips out to take care of some people. He was a physician. And they came back into the camp the third time when they were going to then escape. Up pulls a Red Cross vehicle. And so they think, well, there's no need to escape now. The Red Cross people say, don't worry about this. The documents have been signed. The war is over. The Red Cross vehicle leaves, and all the SS troops pour in that night. They round up everybody in the friendliest manner they could ever be in, or that they had ever seen them in, and say, we're taking you to a different place. They load up 3 trucks, and the head physician left Viktor Frankl and another fellow off of the last truck because he said there's not room for you here. All of those people went to another camp where they were put into buildings, and the buildings were burned to the ground. And Frankel ended up having the regrets that he didn't go with those people. He didn't know what was going to happen. The next morning he wakes up to gunfire, bullets coming through the walls of the concentration camp, people running in and telling him to get on the floor. You know, just by pure serendipity, by pure fate, he lived to be able to tell that story. And that's one of the things that he talks about, is that much of life is just serendipitous, that it's luck, that it's fate. In the camp, he said many of the best people, the finest people, didn't make it. Others did, him included, I suppose in part for the purpose of being able to write this story that everybody should read. The last part of it I didn't spend too much time with, because it was the psychology of all of these things meant more for scholars than for lay people, I believe. But there are many things to think about as you read that period of time that he was in the concentration camp that we should all be thinking about, that are important in all of our daily lives, even though we will never, hopefully, ever go through the types of things that he and other people went through in the Second World War. So, recommending Man's Search for Meaning. Pick it up again. You probably read it in college like I did, but it was a whole new experience reading again. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. Sarah, Margo. Margo's two authors, in case you didn't remember them, are Ruth Reichel and Susan Loomis. Susan of the cookbook variety, and Ruth with her memoirs. And we had Susan Power, an author really pretty well known in this community. She has some well-received novels from earlier on too. And this was Sacred Wilderness, and then Man's Search for Meaning. Do we have any questions from the audience about any of those three selections or the readers? If not, Connie's going to draw the name of at least one lucky person who's going to get to give their recommendation to us live and spontaneously. Gretchen Gray would like to talk about The Warmth of Other Suns. You want to come up here?
Well, I certainly didn't plan on doing anything like this. It was a very last-minute decision to come here tonight. I read this book within the last 2 years, and when asked on that form what book I would recommend, I thought of this book because it had such an impact for me. I don't recall the woman who wrote it. It's about 3 different black people and their families as they migrate from the issues that they face in the South with very, very overt prejudice into the non-overt prejudice in the North. And it's a really, really moving account. One of them goes to New York and comes back and forth. He ends up being a Pullman on a train. Another man who's a doctor makes his way to LA. And the third group go to Chicago. And the reason I really recommend this is that it gave me such a level of insight into what it's like to be a minority. And it was such a memorable book. I hope that some of you will read it. Thank you.
How about Betty McGarry telling us about Bohemian Flats by Mary and Melinda Sells?
Can you say the name of the other book one more time?
The Warmth of Other Suns.
The Warmth of Other Suns.
S-U-N.
I think the author of The Warmth of Other Suns is Isabel Williams. Am I close? Wilkinson. It was a W. Right, good. If you're interested, I've read that too, and it's wonderful. Bohemian Flats takes us to a place. And the more I read, the more I like going somewhere. I like going to Summit Avenue or going to the French countryside. Setting has become really important. Bohemian Flats is an area on the Mississippi River across from the university. We have these big bluffs that, from which we look down at the river. But on the west bank of the Mississippi is a low-lying area that wasn't good for development. But in the early part of this century was the place where the Eastern European immigrants were able to find homes or build homes or shacks or whatever. They were able to live there. So Bohemian Flats by Mary Ellis, E-L-L-I-S, is a story of Minneapolis and one of our immigrant communities that is fiction, but is set in this very interesting place with a very interesting population of German and Czech and Hungarian and all immigrants who came there and would live on the river, would take sustenance from the river, would lose family to the river, and work at the flour mills. And so this story goes back and forth between Germany and Minneapolis and covers a lot of time, the 2 world wars. It's great. Thank you.
And this is a novel, and the previous volunteer from the floor had a nonfiction book, so we're keeping a nice balance as we go forward. Let's see how that continues. I'm really excited about introducing our next speaker because he continues a tradition that started with the very first Edina Reads book. We organized a panel to talk about The Kite Runner that was titled Courage in Personal and Professional Life. And I hope none of the other panelists are here because the star of the panel was a high school junior who had great stories of what it took to succeed in high school here. And you know about that. Still emotional about it. Mark isn't quite yet in high school. He's an 8th grader at Valley View Middle School. He's an avid reader, enjoys all kinds of books, especially mysteries. There are a lot of mysteries when you're in the 8th grade, aren't there? Favorite childhood books include Chasing Vermeer by Blue Ballier, The Harry Potter Series, and When You Reach Me by Rebecca Steed, which he's going to talk about tonight. He's fascinated by linguistics because he speaks fluent French and intermediate level Finnish. He was a semifinalist in the 2014 Scripps National Spelling Bee and was a member of a world champion Knowledge Master Open team. This is not what I was doing in the 8th grade, so it's hard to even talk about it. Anyway, Mark's going to talk about that Rebecca Steed book in his turn. Our next speaker is Dr. Bruce Locklear, principal who knows all about challenges in high school, or at least the challenges in a first-rate, nationally highly regarded high school. It might be different in some other high schools. And some of that is due to Bruce's leadership there over the last few years. His school has been recognized, as we probably have heard, by both U.S. News and World Report and Newsweek as one of the top public high schools in America. Beyond Bruce's work as a high school principal, he's highly engaged with the Minnesota Association of Secondary School Principals, where he recently completed a term as a member of the board of directors. He's been named Minnesota Principal of the Year in 2010 and serves on the board of directors for the National Association of Secondary School Principals. He's going to tell us about a nonfiction book by several authors, a committee project, Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. And our 6th speaker is Jennifer Mayerle. We love authors and writers who bring family with them to fill out the crowd. She has a couple proud parents here. Jennifer grew up, I believe, in Edina, went to high school here, started her career in journalism as an intern at WCCO, then left and finally came back this last year at this stage in her career. In the meantime, she was in Atlanta where she won several prominent awards, including an Emmy. I won't tell about all of them, but I thought you'd be interested in what she won the Emmy for. It was for her in-depth look at the long-lasting impact of concussions and repeated hits to the head in athletics from the youth to the pro level. That led to the Georgia legislature passing an act called the Return to Play Act, So this was representational of her style as a reporter, to tell stories that positively impact the community, to report on ordinary people who act in extraordinary ways, and to investigate problematic situations that can be corrected by an informed public. So, her book is also one of my favorites, Orphan Train by Anne Baker Klein. We're going to start with Mark, and then go to Bruce, and then to Jennifer.
The book I picked today is When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead, and it's my favorite book. And the author has written 3 books so far. She was the first winner of the Guardian Children's Fiction Prize, and she was the first American winner. It's a British award by the Guardian newspaper for children's fiction. And this book also won the Newbery Award in 2010. And the story is about a girl named Miranda who lives in New York. And she walks home with her best friend Sal every day. She eats at a sub shop. She avoids the strange homeless man on the corner. And her favorite book is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And she has been best friends with Sal for her entire life, but one day he gets punched on the street by some random boy, and he suddenly just stops talking to her. But she makes new friends, but strange things start to happen around her, and her spare key to her and her mom's apartment is stolen, and she receives a mysterious note that says, I am coming to save your friend's life and my own. I ask for 2 favors. First, you must write me a letter. And the notes continue to come, and she realizes that the person who's writing them knows things that nobody should be knowing yet. And it's a very interesting book because the mystery in the book is complicated at first, but when you finally figure out the solution at the end, all the puzzle pieces fall into place. And I like those types of books because it keeps you on the edge of your seat, and you're constantly trying to figure out what's about to happen next, and then you're just surprised. You don't know so there's a huge plot twist at the end, and it combines the genres of mystery and science fiction in a way that's never been done before. And it's a thrilling and exciting and suspenseful book, and even though it was written for children, I would recommend it to people of all ages.
How can I not love my job? Wow. You'll be at high school soon. I can't wait. Reading is something that is very special to me. My parents were uneducated people. My father dropped out of school in 6th grade, and he couldn't read. And I remember the first day that I realized that. I was an adult standing next to him in church, and he was lip-syncing a hymn that was not a well-known hymn. And I looked at him and I thought, I can't imagine what life would be like to not be able to read. And I have been and always will be a prolific reader. I have probably 3 or 4 books going at the same time. When I travel with a Kindle, and I love reading. But that was an awareness to me that I will never forget. And it instilled an appreciation for me that as long as I can read, I will read. I have the best job on the face of the earth. I work with young people every single day, and you never know what you're going to get on any given day. We are in a world where we're trying to help young people move from dependence to interdependence to being absolutely independent. We work with young people at a critical time of making decisions. And it is my privilege to serve our young people, and I absolutely love what I do. My book that I selected for tonight it's a boring book, and I apologize, but I really don't. How many people have been in the middle of a conflict with anyone? Raise your hand. All right, we got it. We're good now. My book is Crucial Conversations, and it deals with how to manage difficult conversations that no one really likes to manage. As a matter of fact, so much so, when the stakes are high, we tend to do one of two things. We tend to get in a fight, or we tend to run. It's the fight or flight syndrome. In my line of work, I can do neither. So I have to manage a lot of different people with a lot of different ideas at a lot of different times on any given day. And so I met this author this past summer at a leadership conference and had a great time talking with him, Joseph Grenny. And he talked about the importance of having and managing crucial conversations. He said, first of all, people never know they are in a crucial conversation until it's way too late. They figure it out when they've messed it up. They figure it out when it's a blunder, and they figure it out when both people walk away angry and upset. And one of the examples that he used was in a hospital. And there were 7,000 doctors and nurses who were involved with procedures. And they were evaluating crucial moments of caregivers. And one of the things that they found consistent was that at that crucial moment, a lot of people made mistakes. But guess what? No one ever talked about it. So the mistakes kept on going, and they deemed this research the silent killer research. And I found that fascinating. So one of the things that we talk about when you're in the middle of a crucial conversation was to learn how to recognize that. And it's hard to do. I grew up in the South. I don't have the Minnesota nice gene, and so I tend to be sometimes too forthright with my conversations. And so one of the things that he talks about is when you're in the middle of a conversation to make sure that you start that conversation with heart. What is it that I need from this conversation? What is it that you need from this conversation? And what will build our relationship as an outcome of this conversation? So starting with heart is one of the first things that he talks about. He says if you begin there, things tend to end well. Second, he said to always learn to look. There are always cues internal when you engage in a crucial conversation. For me, my neck starts to get a little warm. My palms get and I start getting fidgety. And I one of the trainings I've been in is to learn to watch people's eyes. And your eyes never lie. And so when people start to look away or they start darting left and right, we're in for a crucial conversation. And so one of the things he talked about was to learn to look for that. And he talks about the importance of safety. Safety in any conversation. He talks about when we lose safety, the conversation is gone. And so he frames this up around the whole idea of, through that recognition, try to create safe places. And we create safe places by telling stories. I grew up in the South. I'm going back home to the Carolinas Thursday and Friday to my niece's wedding, and my father was part Native American, and so my two daughters are going with me, and we're going on a pilgrimage for them to join the tribe. So I'm very excited about that. I don't know why I threw that in, but anyway, but make it safe, and you do that by telling stories. So I just told a story, and the stories have to relate to issues around safety and always begin with the facts. One of the things that we get into when we get into this fight or flight syndrome is that we tend to make up things. And sometimes we make up things where we create villains in other people, or we create victims in ourselves, or we just avoid the entire conversation. and we leave it behind. It is a book, again, that our administrative team has gone through, and we have a discussion every single week about what the book tells us, but then we take it into a phase of application. How are we using this? And most importantly, what are we learning from it? I thank you so very much for the opportunity to be here tonight, and I thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity to serve your young people, and he will be mine in a matter of time. So thank you.
Hello. My name is Jennifer. I'm a storyteller at heart, so it's really fun to have a good book and to read a good story and to hear from everyone else about what they like. I chose Orphan Train by Christina Baker Klein, and I saw a lot of heads nod when that was first mentioned. Have a few people in the room read the book? Couple? Okay, so this is one that other people have seen. I like all types of books, from ones I read in the summer, which are kind of no-brainer books, to biographies. But what I enjoy reading the most is something that I can learn from. And although this book is fiction, I consider it kind of historical fiction because it's based on real events. And I recently moved back to Minnesota after being away since graduating from Edina High School. And what I've enjoyed the most is relearning things about Minnesota that make up our history. And this book gives a little bit of a glimpse into some of Minnesota's history. Between the mid-1800s and the early 1920s, the so-called orphan trains transported orphans, homeless, abandoned children from New York to the Midwest in an effort to get them adopted. People would show up at the train station looking for a child to adopt, and many times the family that the child would be placed with would be left to chance. Some of them would truly be looking for a child to adopt. Others would be looking for a farmhand, someone to help with household chores. Some were taken advantage of, and others found a place with a nice family. So this book goes from modern day Maine to Depression-era Minnesota. And it follows the story of 17-year-old Molly and 90-year-old Vivian. And Vivian is an Irish immigrant, and they have an unlikely friendship. Molly has grown up in the foster care system, essentially raised by strangers. And her last chance at staying in her current foster home is by helping Vivian clean out her attic, and through kind of a community service project. And as the story goes, she soon starts to unravel Vivian's past and how she came to live in Minnesota, how she took an orphan train here, and how their lives really are not so different, even though their ages are worlds apart. There are lessons throughout the book that I thought were really interesting about the importance of family and who your family is, whether it's being blood related or the family that you choose, and the tale of kind of hardships, how you get through them, and having second chances, as both of these women in this book got a second chance. There's also a few parts, for maybe those of you who have read it, that felt a little bit rushed and maybe a little bit unlikely. The end of the book deals with some technology and social media, and it felt like all of a sudden it was really rushed through and seemed a little bit unlikely. But more so, the book made me laugh. It made me want to grab a tissue. And there were some unexpected twists that really made you think. And for me, a book that makes me think is a favorite book, one that begins a conversation. And after I read this, I wanted to learn more about Minnesota's history and about the orphans who came on trains to Minnesota. It made me really actually want to do a story on them for WCCO. You learn in the book that there are orphan reunions, and they happen every year, and they've been happening for 54 years. I see some people nodding that know about this in the state. And Minnesota has the highest number of orphan train riders living. There are 5 of them. They range in age from 95 to 102, although I'm told that the 102-year-old recently left Minnesota for Arizona full time. I know, I guess I kind of get it after last winter. But they've been going on for 54 years in our state, and the last one just happened this past Saturday. And it's part of Minnesota's history that I was interested to learn about through this historical fiction book. And I think for any of you who have not read it in this room, that would be a good book to read as well. Thank you.
Well, these readers are doing a pretty good job of staying on schedule. We've had 3 really interesting books, a fiction by our 8th grader, Mark, and I might have not pronounced his name right, Kivamaki? Kivamaki, okay. Rebecca Steed book, When You Reach Me. Bruce's book was Crucial Conversations by a group of authors starting with Carrie Patterson, probably all you need to know. And finally, Christina Baker Klein's book, Orphan Train. Do you have any questions about the books or for those readers? If not, you're exposing yourself to chance. You could be asked to stand up here. Connie, do we have a nominee? Looks like Nancy Ostromsky is going to talk to us about The Land of Dreams by Vidar Sundstrom.
You pick the person who knows the least about Minnesota and the person who wants to know about Minnesota. The book I chose was The Land of Dreams. It's the first book, fiction, in a trilogy. It goes from current day North Shore, that is Lake Superior, not the North Shore of Chicago that I know so well, but the North Shore of Lake Superior. The gentleman is Swede. He's won all kinds of prizes. Now, I can't pronounce his name, but I'll spell it. Sundstol, with 2 dots over that last O. And if you ever think about clan, duty, or love, murder, and a man named Lance, and as my book clubs know, there is not one word a gifted writer writes that has not been chosen. So why is this forest employee with the first name of Lance involved in discovering a murder that involves clan, duty, and love? So he's a Swedish writer. 2 of the books have been translated into English. One of them was written about in Sunday's paper. Whether you ever know anything about anything, you will love this book because it has everything in it.
Didn't I tell you that the whole truth was that the readers are pretty interesting too? Well, number 7 on our menu is Marty Sen, the creative director of Carmichael Lynch, a Minneapolis ad agency. Originally from Edina, he moved back here just last year, another returning native, after working with agencies in Seattle, Boston, New York, London, and San Francisco. Marty comes from a family with an Edina Reads history, because his father, Fred, 4 years ago, had a great program in this same room on his book, Juicing the Orange, how to turn creativity into a business advantage. Sounds like we're going to hear a little bit from the fruit that didn't fall far from the tree. He'll discuss 2 books, Creativity, Inc. by Ed Catmull with Amy Wallace, and Good Night Construction Site by Sherry Dusky-Ringer, and from Tom Lichtenfield, which he's read to his 2 sons, ages 4 and 2. Then Dr. Philip Seidel, who has been an Edina resident for over 50 years, continuously, as I understand it, except maybe for medical school. He grew up in Morningside, which allowed him to watch our community become a great place to live, while participating in local church and Morningside School in Weber Park, then Highlands, Southview, and Edina East High School. Now he considers himself lucky to live a block from his family home, and within a block of his brother, and he's able to walk to his medical office within 8 blocks. That's an Edina vision, isn't it? He'll tell us about a different city, the cool gray city of love. That's not a very good description of Edina. The cool gray city of love, 49 views of San Francisco by Gary Carnia. And finally, Maxine Wallen is a longtime resident of Edina and one of our community's leading philanthropists, continuing a strong tradition she began with her late husband, Win Wallen. The Wallen Education Foundation now serves 26 high schools, awards scholarships to 26 high schools in the metro area, and since 1992 has awarded over 2,500 scholarships totaling over $25 million. She attended Macalester College in the University of Minnesota, worked as a librarian at the university, and then as a medical research librarian in Utah when the family lived there. She's been a member of the foundation board for the last 3 years, and is also an Edina Reads veteran of sorts. She was the introducer for Mary Lou Judd Carpenter, daughter of the ambassador, when we had a program last spring on Miriam's Words, her mother's autobiography. I guess I don't know what Maxine's going to talk about, so she'll tell us when the time comes. So in sequence, we have Marty, Dr. Seidel, and Maxine Wallen.
All right, well, thank you for having me. I'm proud that I'm the first one that has a book that rhymes tonight. I feel good about that. Linda Brandt, who I literally grew up across the street from, invited me to do this summer. I said, Linda, the only books I read rhyme or have giant pictures to them, and she said that'd be fine, bring it along. Fortunately, I picked up another book in the meantime, so I'll talk about both of those, and then I'm going to make an attempt to thematically connect the two books, so we'll see how that goes. Here's how it goes. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so my book selection goes like this. For the 4-year-old and the 2-year-old, there's about a half-hour negotiation that happens every night to select the books. For myself, I pick up what's in front of an airport book stand. So those are the two that I'll talk about. What I'm reading for myself is called Creativity, Inc., and it's by Ed Catmull. And I don't know if any of you know about this book or have read it. It's out fairly recently. Ed Catmull founded Pixar, famous for Toy Story, Up, The Incredibles, all sorts of movies that I love. Now, coincidentally, I can enjoy with my boys as well. It's a management book, which is not the sort of book I would normally embrace. It's not what I like to read. I like to read fiction. But when a book about Pixar came out, I kind of had to pick it up because I think that's an amazing company, and I had to know more about it. I'm going to read to you don't worry, I'm not doing a reading tonight. The subhead of the book is Overcoming the Unseen Forces That Stand in the Way of True Inspiration. I think that's a terrible subtitle for a book. I think what it should be is lessons from Pixar, full force. I think we can learn so much from a company like that has made these amazing movies that we really love. And as I think about it, when I say it's a management book, it doesn't feel to me like a book that's teaching you how to manage people or even manage a company, but how to manage a creative process. And I think that's something individually we all kind of do in our own way, whether we're writers, reporters, journalists, bakers, cooks, knitters, whatever it might be. I think we all have our own creative process. And for me, the book has been really great at kind of clarifying this notion that nothing starts in that beautiful, fully baked way, and that we really need to work through the process, learn from each other. There's one chapter called Ugly Babies. And that's that idea of like, hey, babies are born ugly, but they grow into beautiful people. And ideas are a lot like that, and creative projects are like that, that just because it starts out ugly, don't abandon it. It might actually turn into something really pretty great. So I've been enjoying that. I'm not done with it, full disclosure, so I can't tell you if it's good all the way through. But so far it's been great, and I really enjoy reading about a company like that that's brought so many interesting things in the world that I think we can all appreciate at any age level. I compare that to some other books that I couldn't read, management books. I couldn't read something from Warren Buffett because I don't understand that, but I can go downstairs and watch a movie with my boys, and so I can see how that comes to life. So I've really been enjoying that book. The second book I brought, Good Night Construction Site. It's for the boys. And the reason I actually chose it is it's really interesting. Tom Lichtenheld, who is the illustrator of the book, was an art director in advertising here in Minneapolis for a long time, and always drew his own storyboards and drew his own ads, before they became photographed, and sort of discovered that, hey, I actually like doing that more than this advertising thing. Maybe that could turn into something that I can really do. And what I like about this book, and it's silly to even talk about a children's book, But the cadence is really wonderful of the book. If you have to read out loud a lot, it's nice that it flows, and it's pleasant to read. And I would never sing anything, but it feels that way. And the boys like to fill in the blanks, and that's really fun. And the illustrations are great. I think he has a lot of books. A lot of them are New York Times bestsellers, and it's really interesting to see that second act happen for somebody. So thematically, that's the theme for me that connects the two books that I think is really fun. And for whatever reason, it would be a much larger conversation about my psyche of why this is important to me right now. But the idea of second acts, I think, is really interesting. Tom Lichtenheld kind of going down this one path and finding that there's something else that he really loved. The story of Pixar was a company that made a technology to help other companies animate their films, but to show it off, they had to make their own film. And so that's really a second act too. They discovered that they were better at something else. The technology was fine, but they were really good storytellers. And so they found what they really loved. So those are my two books tonight. And I think whether you're in those fields or not, I think there's a lot to offer. I don't know what field that is. Spoiler, the trucks fall asleep at the end. So if you don't want to read it, now you know. So. What age is this for? Well, my 4-year-old loves it. The 2-year-old is starting to love trucks, so he's getting there. I think up to 6 or 7. What's really nice, honestly, and again, it seems kind of silly talking about, but trucks are heroes to my 2-year-old, and the fact that they fall asleep at the end, it makes it okay for him to do the same. So, thank you.
Perfect, because now I have approval that Doc Locke liked my book. Outstanding. I'm done for the evening. Set that there.
There's one in every crowd.
There is, isn't there? Where's the button? Is that better? No. No. You had it on. There. There. Is that better? No. It's lighting up. Yes? Oh, perfect. I do much better when I move. Kind of like the old Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. First off, I have to say how wonderful it would be if I had the hot zone tonight for my book, which is the Ebola by Preston. If you've never read it, amazing book. It'll put the chill in you, and we'll see kind of what happens with the whole world going on here. But first off, for all of you who are afraid, you drove here, you walk here, you got here, highly more dangerous than what's going on. So, enough on that. Next, having been a Edina resident, yes, I have not left. I've stayed. Even from medical school, I was here. I have been lucky enough to join up and join my family business. It's been a wonderful ride. I have to look at this library and think back to Morningside Library, who, if anyone remembers it, was the size of this coat room. And I'm blanking on the wonderfully elderly gal who ran that thing. You'd walk in, and man, that was her place. And we were afraid of her. I mean, you went in, you washed your hands, you touched the books, you signed out the card, you made sure it was in the right little spot, and you made sure you had it back in time. So watching the community grow, I mean, wonderful. All right, enough about that. My wife and I, empty nesters, thank you, as of shortly, and I think his transcript is gone and safe, so you can't hurt me anymore. We love to travel. Recently, we were in San Francisco. Had a wonderful time, and one of my patients said, hey, you're going out there. There's this cool thing called City Guides, okay? It's run by the library, okay? Volunteer docents who give walking tours. It's free. Free got me, okay. So we're out there, and we pull it up on the website, and I printed it up on my phone, and every day they'd have like 4 or 5. So at 11:30, they have Chinatown. Great. You show up at this intersection. Guy shows up, clipboard, little name badge. He says, if you like it at the end, there's an envelope you can donate to the library. We do not accept any money. You cannot tip us. 10, 15 people show up, and off you go. An hour and a half of walking, telling stories, their deal, their view of the city. So we did Chinatown. It was fascinating. And at the end, you just either go back and see something you want to see more of, or you walk away. We did hidden spaces in the market, in the financial district. which are wonderful. The top of buildings that Wells Fargo open public spaces, but they're privately owned. You could go find these. You could have lunch in them. Great, walking through lobbies, seeing the history. We went through the Castro district with the whole gay movement way back when. Fascinating stuff. Free. I highly recommend it. Other cities have some of them also, but if you get to San Francisco, go. That is where my book comes in. 49 Views of San Francisco. One of our tour guides said, if you want an inside look at San Francisco, please pick up this book. My wife got it. I got this letter saying, please come talk to this group tonight. I'm like, wrong address, it should go next door or something. It's like, okay, wonderful. She said, you should look at this. It is a fascinating book. It is not the best well-written. The words are too big, it's a little too flowery in areas, that's fine, but it gives you in-depth views, and the wonderful part is, you don't have to read it in order. I was bouncing all over the place. There's 49 chapters. You want to read about Chinatown? Fine. You want to read about Golden Gate? Fine. You want to read about the Tenderloin District, which is like the nightlife area, careful. Fine, you can read it. And it gives you old history, new history. It gives you the 49ers and all that sort of stuff. I am so excited now to go back to San Francisco and to go into some of these areas and re-look at it under a new light. So, that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, I won't roam around. I'll stand behind the podium. Sometimes it's good to have something to hang on to hold you up. When I mentioned this book I had about World War II called On Hitler's Mountain, Overcoming the Legacy of a Nazi Childhood, so whoever it was that I talked to said, that's it, you do that one. So, and some of us here, I think, lived through World War II, and we had some German connections probably and experiences. When we lived in Ogden, there was a fellow there that was from the German milling school at Braunschweig, German miller. And he had told me what it was like to be in the bomb craters. And he'd been on both fronts. The Russian front was so horrible, no one wanted to go there, I'm sure. And that was his version of it. So anyway, this book is On Hitler's Mountain by Irmgard Hunt. The subtitle is Overcoming the Legacy of a Nazi Childhood. Well, she's lived in the U.S. as time went on and after she was grown and educated and so forth. But she grew up with unemployment and in fact, twin demons became total reality and infections for her grandmother and most of the German middle class during the years of the Weimar Republic of World War I, featuring national era created by a festering natural area, I should say, created by she terms it the notorious Treaty of Versailles. Anyway, at age 13, her mother young people had to keep the family and find a job, and she took weekly English classes. She worked in small factories. Anyway, they ended up, when the mother was married, going to the Berchtesgaden, which was near the home that Hitler built up on the mountain that we've all heard about and probably seen pictures of it. Anyway, she married a man who painted china in the factories in Berchtesgaden, and that was a developing tourist town, of course, in the Bavarian Alps. And that's where, at that time, they were all learning the Jews were the enemies for the National Socialist Workers' Party. Hitler's support, I thought this sentence was interesting. Hitler's support came from wealthy interests who hoped to control him. And she talks about Kristallnacht and so forth, and the daughter, anyway, the daughter was born, and at one time Frau Göring when there had been some bombings as the war progressed, she had given the children in this Berchtesgaden area some dolls. It was interesting to me that they were French dolls, you know, because I remember my mother had a German doll. It went way back. So I thought that was sort of interesting, and it was a nice gesture in a sense, too. Anyway, as time went on, the concentration camps came along and the programs for Jews and so forth, and 200 businesses were destroyed. The Nazi leadership families all had homes, it seemed the major ones we've heard of, up on the mountain where Hitler was. And at 3, it's her picture on the book here. She was picked out by Hitler. She was kind of an attractive little girl, and he liked to kind of feature his friendship with children, and so she was taken on his lap and so forth. Anyway, her father was called to the war. That was in 1939, and he later died in France. And so the world was shattered by the end of the Nazi era, and millions had suffered. And the author later marries and studies in the U.S. and in fact receives some advanced degrees in the U.S. I thought it was fascinating because I had met some people who had been on the German side. And one time at Carleton College at a dinner, I sat next to Richard Helms. And I thought it was interesting in the recent, Smithsonian Magazine it was. It said, this is under the title, The Purloined Letter. It sounded like something by Edgar Allan Poe. As the Nazi regime collapsed in 1945, a young OSS officer sat down to write a letter to his son in the United States. Dear Dennis, he wrote, the man who might have written on this card once controlled Europe. 3 short years ago, when you were born. Today he's dead, his memory despised, his country in ruins. He had a thirst for power, a low opinion of man as an individual, and a fear of intellectual honesty. He was a force for evil in the world. His passing, his defeat, a boon to mankind, but thousands died that it might be so. The price for ridding society of bad is always high. Love, Daddy. The card on which Richard Helms was writing was a piece of Adolf Hitler's personal stationery. It bore a gold embossed eagle holding a swastika above the Nazi leader's name. To the right was printed the word Ober-Salzburg, referring to Hitler's retreat high in the Bavarian Alps above Berchtesgaden. I found the letter when I was in high school, this fellow said, a bunch of scrapbooks my mother kept, but I had no idea of its significance. Dennis Helms, now 72 and a lawyer in New Jersey, told me it just sat there in a suitcase I kept under my bed, tucked away in a scrapbook with Christmas pictures. He donated it to the agency in 2011. He says the letter gave him insight into the secretive and private nature of his father, who served as CIA director from 1966 to 1973 when he was dismissed by President Richard Nixon. Richard Helms died in 2002. I happened to sit next to him at a dinner at Carleton College years ago, and he was just fascinating, man. All these years, you know, with the CIA and everything. And he'd been in Berlin during the 1936 Olympics, I think it was, as a young service officer, and he was riding in a car right behind Hitler, and he was aware of some of the situation there. I think that was it Jesse Helms that won so many awards, and Hitler didn't especially like that. He said, I knew early on he was in the CIA, and when friends asked, I would say he worked for the State Department. They would ask what he did, and I said, I don't know. They said, you must be pretty stupid. When Dennis asked his father how he'd managed to snare a piece of Hitler's stationery, he received a vague answer. Although the letter was dated VE Day, May 8th, 1945, Richard Helms wasn't even in Germany that day, although he was later stationed in Berlin. Dennis said he wasn't surprised that his father's life remained surrounded by mysteries. I found things in the museum that he had never mentioned. I thought, it just took me back to the dinner at Carleton when I sat next to Richard Helms, and he was talking about the Olympics in Berlin and his first trip over there and some of what went on in World War II. And then, of course, we met other people who'd been in the German army and so forth. So I thought the book was fascinating. The author ended up living in the United States, getting advanced degrees and so forth. But it was I don't know, I could relate to this book sort of, and some of us who lived through the war and so forth, I guess we could very well. Thank you.
several more good books. Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull with Amy Wallace. What might be my favorite, with my grandchildren coming soon, Good Night, Construction Site by Tom Lickenfield. Cool Gray City of Love, 49 Views of San Francisco by Gary Carnia. And an Irmgard Hunt book on Hitler's Mountain, Overcoming the Legacy of a Nazi Childhood. Do you have any questions about those books? We're ready for another volunteer. Les Krauss is going to talk to us about David Genoff's book, City of Thieves. Les has been president of the Friends of the Library. It's only appropriate that you be part of this program.
Thank you. City of Thieves is an amazing story of coming of age during the siege of Stalingrad. I don't know many people that are aware of what horrific conditions existed in Stalingrad during the German siege. With all that horror, it's a beautiful book. It traces these two unlikely companions in their travels to find eggs for the commissar's daughter's wedding. As bizarre as that might seem, it's an amazing tale, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It kept me on the edge of my seat throughout. Again, City of Thieves is the name of the book. David Benioff.
Did you read the title? Should I say the title? Did you say the title of it?
Spilling Clarence.
Spilling Clarence by Anne Ursu. I'm Anne Melrose, Senior Librarian at the Edina Library. Relatively new here, although I was an intermittent at the library for about 10 years a little while ago, so I'm familiar with the community. Anne Ursu was mentioned earlier, and the Friends sponsored her children's book with a children's book club this summer. But before she wrote children's books, she wrote two fascinating adult novels. And this is a little lighter than some of the books that just have been talked about. It's a very unusual name, Spilling Clarence. Clarence is a fictional town. Anne Ursu is from Minnesota, and so you can see Minnesota references in the names she chooses to give things. And what has spilled is a chemical from a pharmaceutical company. And the chemical is named deletrium or deletrium. And when I first read the book, I was looking all over on Google to figure out why I didn't know what this was. What didn't I remember about high school chemistry? But the chemical does not exist. That is fictional as well. So I'm going to stop a second and just tell you what kind of a reader I am. I don't read a lot of science fiction or don't read a lot of fantasy. It's just not as interesting to me to track things that aren't part of my life. Well, this is a reality book that slowly bends in just a little bit of fantasy and makes you think. What the release of this chemical does in the community is releases people's memories. And what does that mean? That you can remember absolutely everything with clarity and with accuracy. And she weaves the novel around that. And I come from a family of people that live a very long time, and I began to think about the implications of that, were that the case. So I would recommend Anne Ursu's adult novel called Spilling Clarence. And thank you to everybody that has been part of this evening. It's been just grand for me.
Well, the prerogative of the chair is to mention another book. Very briefly, Daniel James Brown, The Boys in the Boat. There was a reference earlier to the 1936 Olympics. This is the story of the University of Seattle rowing team that came out of nowhere, basically, having never competed in Ivy League competitions or in Pac-10 very successfully until that period of time. They then won the national championship, proceeded to represent the United States in the Berlin Olympics, and it's not a spoiler to tell you what you can read on the dust jacket. They won the gold medal, much to Hitler's consternation. Besides the inspiring story of the competition or the competitors on that team, the other part of that book that's really interesting is the extent to which the author describes Hitler's attempts to whitewash all of Germany to make it look different than it really was for the visitors coming to those Olympics, and how he effectively fooled just about everybody. They realized that within a year or two when the whole situation changed, but it was a propaganda effort of the first order, and just a fascinating book. I want to personally...
What's the title again?
That book is The Boys in the Boat. The Boys in the Boat, Boys in the Boat, by Daniel James Brown. Great book. I want to personally thank the 9 authors for following their cue and doing everything on schedule. It's really amazing. Our authors aren't often that good. You've proved up my point that this is the whole truth is that you all are pretty interesting too. We don't need an author here to make this a fun night. I personally want to thank Linda Brandt and Maureen Millay-Smith for bringing this program together. I think we have to do this again. And now Connie is going to close the program.
I want to thank our speakers, and I would like to say that we're going to give you an honorarium with lots of zeros. I would like to say that, but you're going to get something even better. We have books for you. So when our speakers would come up here when you're done, we have books, and we also would like to get a picture of everyone. So could we have another round of applause for everyone? Thank you. And come to our book sale.